Okay, so let's have a look then at the first clip in this series, and the variation I'd like to discuss is the move 2 knight to f6, which is a bit of a tricky move for white to play against, especially because, of course, he now has the possibility of protecting his pawn in the center. But this does allow the Icelandic gambit, and this is all rather murky, and I just feel like with white there's no need to go into this. So what I'm going to propose is a much more solid and reliable option, and that is the move knight f3. I really think this is a good move in this position. The move knight f3 develops a piece, very natural move, and the onus is now on black to reply. Well, when he plays 2 knight f6, he's almost certainly going to take the pawn back on d5. He's not going to play queen takes d5 often, because he can just play queen takes d5 on move 2 if he wants to enter a mainline Scandinavian. So knight takes d5 really is the move that you will see here. And then I suggest white plays the move pawn to d4. Very simple standard stuff. And here we reach a position where black has got a few moves, a few ideas. The main move nowadays is the move g6, so we'll look at that last. Another move is the move bishop f5. Now I remember a game, I believe, between Topalov and Kamsky, which left a big impression on me about how to play this position with white. And it seemed like white just got a very pleasant position out of the opening, playing very simply. After bishop f5, that bishop is a decent bishop sitting here. So bishop d3, let's neutralize it and develop a piece. Well, we see an exchange. Black has to do something, he has to start developing e6, and now simply castles. It's worth noting that queen b5 check is a bit greedy, because after knight c6, queen takes b7, white wins a pawn, but now after knight db4, his queen is in a real spot of bother, and rook b8 and knight takes c2 are really nasty threats to deal with. So we're not going to do that after e6, we're just going to play sensibly and play the move castles, get our pieces out. Knight c6 and c4. I really like this idea with c4. We gain space on the queen side and in the center. And after knight b6, knight c3, we can see that these pawns here do an excellent job of not only restricting these knights, but they just control a lot of key squares, especially the d5 square, which is so crucial in a lot of these lines. And white is just a bit better. It's just very pleasant for him. Black can play bishop e7, but now I recommend bishop f4, and you would take white all day here. And what I would suggest is that you actually have a look at how Topalov played in this game, because I think it's really instructive. And white has got no problems at all. So I really feel like that's an easy way to play against bishop f5 in this particular variation. Of course, there are others. Another move is to play the move 4, bishop g4. But again, I feel like here white can gain a nice position, a nice edge after the move h3. This is an important move, actually. A lot of the time in Scandinavian we'll see that including h3 and deflecting the bishop from this diagonal, whilst also potentially threatening after bishop h5, the move g4 helps him. Naturally, bishop takes f3 is nothing to worry about. After queen takes f3, we've got the bishop pair. So bishop h5, and now I recommend the move c4. So kicking this knight away. And here, well, knight b6. Black can try bishop takes f3, but after the following forcing variation, queen takes f3, knight b4, queen c3. This is an excellent move. Looks strange, but it's been worked out to be good for white. For example, if black plays e5, white can play d5, and knight d7, a3, the knight's only got one square, and b4. And white has gained lots of space on the queen side, and the move c5 is really ready to come in, and suddenly this bishop is threatening to come this way. We've got moves such as c6 threats. It's very, very, very passive for black, this position. Alternatively here, if, of course, knight 8 c6 straight away, we can just play a3 again. And after e5, well, we can't take that knight because of bishop takes b4, but we can just play bishop d2. This is a tricky little move. And if e takes d4, queen b3, this is all forcing. Knight a6, queen takes b7 is strong for white. As a result then, after c4, we see most players go knight b6. And now I recommend the push c5. This push with c5 we actually see in the other lines with g6 that I'm going to show in a moment. It looks like you concede this d5 square. It looks totally anti-positional, but actually there's a method, some idea behind it. Because after knight d5, white can play the move queen b3. And we see that white gets out of this pin by the bishop and also threatens this vulnerable b7 pawn. And if black defends, for example, with b6, well, knight e5 in this position is very strong indeed. White threatens a deadly bishop b5 check. So black plays c6, but white just plays knight c3. And we see another point behind this move, and that's that we are ganging up on this f7 point, and you can see how much pressure you could gain with white. On top of all of this, of course, b takes c5 is impossible because the queen can just come to b7 and there's no decent way of protecting this rook. So here black players have usually tried e6, but after queen a4, white has got a steady advantage. This is a good move. It attacks this c6 point. And white is just in a really pleasant position here. So bishop g4 in this line, I don't really feel is so critical. Just to very quickly go back to after c5, black does have another move here. He doesn't have to play knight d5, he can play knight c6, d7, but this looks rather passive. And after the following variation, queen b3 I really feel is awkward again for black. b6, but now just to move bishop f4, this is an excellent move and one that I looked at myself. I'm not sure if it's been played before either. But bishop f4 just develops the bishop to a really natural square. The c7 point and this diagonal is of course very important, and it also blunts out any e5 ideas. So after e6, of course, b takes c5 is bad news because of this variation here, and again the rook is in trouble. So we see e6, but now I like knight bd2, so we just give extra protection to this knight. The rook is ready to come to c1, and after bishop e7, rook c1, well, white is just a lot better in my opinion. Much more space, these knights are all tangled up, and this is very pleasant indeed. Okay, so back to d4, and I really feel like most players here will be playing the move g6. This is the more fashionable move. And this position, a bit like the previous one actually, has got similar ideas to an Alekhine defense type position. But I still feel like white gains the upper hand after playing c4 again. We see this move. Knight b6, knight c3, bishop g7, and now c5. Once more we see this. We gain space and we really put the question to the knight. Well, here the knight should come back to d5, but now bishop c4 is a good move in my opinion. So we develop with tempo. And here black has got two options. He can either play c6 or he can play knight takes c3. Knight takes c3 is a move, but simply after taking back, we see that these pawns are protected, connected, and white's space advantage is huge here. He's going to use the b file and the e file for his rooks, and this pawn on e7 is very vulnerable indeed. Whereas black is still really passive here. So a typical line could be castles, castles, and if knight c6, simply rook e1, bishop g4, and bishop g5. And I really feel like white is a bit better here as well. Alternatively, if b6, the move bishop a3 comes to mind, and we see us looking at this e7 point again. So will be developing with rook e1. And it's just, again, very pleasant without having to learn too much theory. Alternatively then, after bishop c4, c6 is the other main move that black has. And here I recommend the move queen to b3. Black castles, white castles, and black normally takes on c3 here. White recaptures. It's worth noting that if another good point of queen b3 is that this pawn is now tied down. So in a lot of lines, black wants to play bishop e6, but with the pawn on b7, this is a lot more difficult. So here, the knight really is on pre, so he has to do something. He takes, b takes c3, and again we see how these pawns work together. And now b5. Otherwise, a move like knight g5 is already in the air, and this f7 point is really weak. So b5 is a good attempt by black, but simply after takes, and now rook e1, well, black can try and exchange this bishop off with bishop a6. However, after takes, bishop g5, rook to a7 to protect this point. Notice how white's development is really fluid as well and really natural. The move a4, I really like this move. This is a nice positional move, stopping black expanding on the queen side. And how to assess this position? Well, again, I just feel like white is a lot better here. It's very easy to play this position. You've got a number of ideas. We can think about this e7 pawn for a start, and it's very difficult to see how black is really developing his own pieces. His knight is at home here. It's just a very pleasant game. So all in all, I feel like playing like this against the knight f6 variation, move 2, is not only sound but very easy to learn. And I recommend you all have a look at some of the top players' games in these lines to just understand a bit more about them. But I think this gives you a good foundation in how to play against this variation. And I'm sure if you study this line well enough, you'll have great success in your own games.